I'm a big fan of Donald Duck and I love classic Disney, so I'm not sure why I'd never seen The Three Caballeros, but I decided finally it was time to watch it. And obviously, when it started with a disclaimer saying there are, unfavorable depictions of certain individuals, I thought, okay, how bad is this going to be? But generally, it's a celebration of certain cultures, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. So I don't actually think it's too bad, but there are definitely some stereotypes that wouldn't be put into the film if it were released today. But it's definitely not racist by any means. But there are definitely stereotypes that, initially I thought it's not that bad. It really isn't. But then I thought, hang on, I have access to the internet and more accurate depictions of these certain cultures. If this is your only introduction to Mexico, for example, then yeah, you might think that this is an accurate depiction and not a stereotype. So I can understand why there's a disclaimer at the start of the film, but at the same time, it's the 21st century. I think nobody is really expecting this to be an accurate depiction, especially as it was released in 1944. But I have to say, it's actually pretty good. The structure of it is really interesting. There's a lot of praise and celebration for Mexican culture and Brazilian culture. Again, there are stereotypes, but none of them are negative. They're just over the top. Um, Obviously, I'm not coming from a place with Brazilian or Mexican heritage, so maybe that, I'd feel differently. But certainly, it is meant to be a celebration. It was apparently actually created, as was Saludos Amigos, which I believe I've reviewed separately, to try and strengthen the bonds between North America and those places during World War II, which seems like a favorable thing to do. I promise I'll talk about the film in a moment, but I have read various receptions for mostly Saludos Amigos. I've not read too much about this one. And it seems like some people thought, yeah, this is great, you're celebrating our culture. Other people were like, what you doing? This is not an accurate depiction. So I think it just depends on whether or not you're able to take it with a pinch of salt, or indeed whether you should. But Donald Duck, back to the film, Donald Duck receives a present on his birthday, and it is a film reel. And he begins to play the film, and it turns out that it's a documentary about this little penguin from the South Pole who wants to travel to hotter climates. And he does this, and then we are introduced to the various birds of Brazil and Mexico, and through these characters, we're introduced to those cultures. Again, stereotypical culture, but that's kind of what you would expect to see, because if somebody does a documentary about British life, it's heightened, it's over the top, it's unrealistic. I think it's expected. But again, maybe for young children who aren't aware of what it's actually like or how to get information about what it's actually like, maybe it would lead them to believe that it's 100% accurate. And what follows are these various birds. Panchito, in particular, I think is quite an iconic bird. He appears quite a lot in Mickey's House of Mouse and things, interacting with animated characters, animated scenery, but also live action as well. And honestly, the live action bits didn't interest me. I didn't think they were as interesting as the animated bits. But for 1944, given that it had been less than 2 decades since some of the Alice comedies cartoons, the transformation is just incredible. And the blending of live action and animation, I think, is done very effectively. There's some music in this that I think is absolutely wonderful and really delightful to listen to. It's a very brightly coloured cartoon. The characters are all easy to get on with. As I said, they are very positive, celebratory depictions, so it's not meant to be offensive. But as I have said, there have been some people I've read in reviews here and there who have kind of thought, this is unrealistic, so therefore it's offensive. But I don't think it is offensive. I think it just has to be acknowledged that it's not necessarily exactly what it's like. There are some bits of vocabulary given. I don't know if the pronunciations are completely accurate. I did read in the goofs section of IMDb that some of the spellings are not correct, which maybe that's where some of the offense came in. If you try and depict this culture or this language and then you get it wrong, that's a little bit offensive, I guess. So I can understand that. And there are some facts given as well about for example, Mexican traditions around Christmas time. I'm taking it with a pinch of salt in terms of being factually accurate, because I don't know if it is correct, but I'm going to assume that it's at least based on some level of truth. But of course, if anybody knows anything alternative, feel free to share that information. But I thought it was pretty good. It definitely wouldn't be released today like this, but at the same time, Disney wasn't wrong to celebrate these other cultures. I just think maybe they took it a bit too extreme. And maybe they needed some more people from Brazil and Mexico working on these films to try and smooth it out a little bit. We have a really brilliant voice cast. It's narrated largely by Sterling Holloway, and the thing about Sterling Holloway is that Sterling Holloway went on to voice Winnie the Pooh, and I can only ever hear Winnie the Pooh when he's narrating in his own voice. So that's a little bit, it does feel like it's narrated by Pooh Bear. Clarence Nash obviously is Donald Duck. We have Pinto Colvig voicing a lot of the great Disney players at the time. So it's very well put together, very, very well animated. The structure of the narrative is quite good. A lot of the information that's displayed is interesting and, if true, very good. But again, I'm not going to just assume that it's correct, because I know that some spellings and things were inaccurate, so there may be other inaccuracies. If people were offended because of that, I completely understand it. But I do genuinely believe that Disney's intentions were in the right place, and their heart was in the right place. Maybe they just overdid it a little bit. But The Three Caballeros is definitely worth watching if you're a Disney fan, particularly a fan of classic Disney. It's certainly very interesting.